Picture two neighbors living on the same quiet street, same city, same rising cost of living, same access to opportunities. They started their careers within a year of each other, both landing stable, respectable jobs in mid-level management. Their salaries were never wildly different, maybe a few $1,000s apart, here and there, but close enough that, from the outside, their financial lives looked almost identical. They bought homes around the same time, raised families, worried about the same economic cycles, and showed up to work day after day for more than 30 years. If you had met them midway through their careers, you would have assumed their futures would look the same. There were no obvious advantages, no inheritances, no lottery wins, no sudden windfalls, just a people walking nearly identical paths. Fast forward to age 68, and the similarity disappears completely. The first neighbor wakes up naturally, without an alarm clock. There's no rush, no urgency, no obligation pulling him out of bed. His investment accounts have quietly grown to over $1.3 million. His house is fully paid off. There are no monthly mortgage payments, no lingering debts eating away at his income. His expenses are covered by a combination of retirement savings, investment income, and carefully planned withdrawals. He spends his mornings walking through the neighborhood, his afternoons exploring hobbies he never had time for, and his evenings planning trips with his spouse. Travel is no longer a luxury, it's a routine part of his life. For the first time since his early 20s, his time fully belongs to him. There's a calmness to his life, a sense of control. Money is no longer a source of stress. It's a tool that supports the life he wants to live. Now look at the second neighbor. Same age, same street, but a completely different reality. She still wakes up to an alarm clock. She still has to get ready for work, still has to commute, still has to answer to a schedule that hasn't loosened its grip. Her retirement savings sit at around $120,000, a number that feels far too small for the stage of life she's in. Her mortgage isn't fully paid off. There are still years remaining. On top of that, she carries ongoing debt, credit cards, maybe a personal loan balances that never fully disappear, only shift slightly from month to month. Retirement, for her, isn't a date circled on a calendar. It's a question mark, a constant calculation. Some nights, she sits down with a calculator, trying to figure out if working until 72 or even 75 will be enough. Some nights, the math works. Other nights, it doesn't. And that uncertainty follows her everywhere. What makes this story powerful isn't the contrast itself, it's how ordinary both lives were along the way. There was no dramatic turning point where one made a brilliant financial decision and the other made a catastrophic mistake. There were no extreme risks or bold moves that defined their futures. Instead, their outcomes were shaped by small, consistent decisions repeated over decades. Tiny habits, quiet choices, the kind that feel insignificant in the moment, but become everything over time. The first neighbor didn't suddenly become wealthy overnight. He simply saved consistently. He treated saving like a fixed expense, something that had to be paid every single month, just like rent or utilities. Before he even had a chance to spend his income, a portion of it was already set aside. It wasn't about discipline in a traditional sense, it was about removing the need for discipline altogether. By automating his savings, he made the right decision once and allowed that decision to repeat itself for years without requiring constant effort. The second neighbor, on the other hand, approached money differently, not irresponsibly, but reactively. Saving was something that happened if there was money left at the end of the month, and as life tends to do, it filled every available gap. Expenses grew, unexpected costs appeared, lifestyle slowly expanded. There was always a reason to delay saving just for now, just until things stabilized, just until the next raise. But later has a way of becoming permanent. One of the biggest differences between them was when they started. The first neighbor began saving early, even when the amounts were small. At the time, it didn't feel significant. A few $1,000s a year doesn't seem life-changing when you're young, but time transformed those small contributions into something powerful. Compounding did the heavy lifting. Growth built upon growth, quietly accelerating in the background. By the time he reached his 40s and 50s, the momentum was undeniable. The second neighbor started later, not dramatically later, maybe a decade, but that gap made all the difference. Because when it comes to investing, time isn't just important, it's everything. The early years are where the foundation is built. Missing them doesn't just delay progress, it reduces the total outcome in a way that's almost impossible to fully recover from, even if she contributed similar amounts later in life. The lost time meant lost growth, and lost growth compounds into a massive gap over decades. Another critical difference was how they handled interruptions. Life is unpredictable. Emergencies happen. Opportunities arise. There are moments when dipping into savings feels necessary, even justified. The second neighbor faced these moments and responded the way many people do, by tapping into her long-term savings to solve short-term problems. A withdrawal here, a loan there. Each decision made sense at the time, but every interruption reset the compounding process. It's not just the money that was taken out, it's the future growth of that money that disappeared with it. The first neighbor made a different choice. He protected his investments, not because it was easy, but because he understood the long-term cost of breaking compounding. When challenges came up, he looked for other solutions. He adjusted his spending, delayed purchases, or found alternative ways to manage the situation. His investments remained untouched, continuing to grow quietly in the background. Debt also played a defining role in their outcomes. The second neighbor carried debt into later stages of life. It wasn't extreme or reckless, but it was persistent. A mortgage that stretched longer than expected, credit card balances that never fully disappeared, monthly payments that quietly consumed a portion of her income year after year. By the time she approached retirement, those obligations hadn't gone away, they had simply become part of her normal financial structure. The first neighbor focused on eliminating debt over time. He didn't rush it aggressively, but he made consistent progress. By the time he reached retirement, his financial obligations were minimal. Without monthly debt payments, his required income dropped significantly. That's a critical point many people overlook. Retirement isn't just about how much you have saved, it's about how much you need to spend. Lower expenses create more flexibility, more freedom, and more security. Then there's the impact of inflation, something both neighbors experienced equally, but prepared for differently. Over 30 or 40 years, the cost of living doesn't just rise, it transforms. What once felt affordable becomes expensive. What once felt expensive becomes out of reach. The first neighbor accounted for this. His investments were positioned to grow over time, outpacing inflation and preserving his purchasing power. The second neighbor underestimated this slow, steady force. Her savings didn't grow at the same pace, which meant that even as her account balance increased, its real-world value didn't stretch as far as she expected. This is one of the most subtle but powerful financial challenges. Everything gets more expensive, but if your money isn't growing faster than that increase, you're effectively moving backward. Another key difference was clarity. The first neighbor knew his number. He had a clear target, a specific amount he needed to achieve financial independence. That number guided his decisions. It gave his actions direction. Every contribution, every investment, every financial choice was connected to that goal. The second neighbor never defined a clear target. Saving felt abstract. There was no concrete endpoint, no clear measure of progress. Without a defined goal, it's easy to underestimate how much is needed and overestimate how much time is available. The absence of a target doesn't just create uncertainty, it leads to inaction. Perhaps the most important takeaway from their story is this: the gap between them wasn't created by income, it was created by behavior, by patterns, by habits repeated over years and decades. The math behind financial success is surprisingly straightforward. Save consistently, start early, let compounding work, avoid unnecessary debt, protect your investments, adjust for inflation, define a clear goal. None of these ideas are new. None of them are complicated, but they require consistency. And consistency is where most people struggle. It's easy to make the right decision once. It's much harder to make it repeatedly. especially when the benefits aren't immediate. The first neighbor didn't rely on motivation or willpower. He built systems. Automation ensured that saving happened regardless of how he felt in any given month. Structure replaced uncertainty. Over time, those systems created momentum, and that momentum carried him to a place where financial stress no longer dictated his choices. The second neighbor relied more on intention. She wanted to save. She planned to save. But without systems in place, those intentions were constantly challenged by the realities of daily life. Expenses came first, saving came second, and second place, over decades, leads to dramatically different outcomes. The story of these two neighbors isn't unusual. In fact, it's incredibly common. Across the world, people with similar incomes end up in completely different financial situations, not because one was smarter or more fortunate, but because their behaviors diverged in small ways that compounded over time. If there's one lesson to take from this, it's this: time amplifies everything. Good decisions become great outcomes. Delayed decisions become permanent consequences. The earlier you start, the more room you give yourself to grow. The more consistent you are, the less you have to rely on luck. Financial security in retirement isn't built on a single breakthrough moment. It's built on thousands of quiet decisions made over years. Decisions that don't feel important at the time. Decisions that don't produce immediate results. But together, they create a future that looks completely different. The math works. It has always worked. But it only works if you give it time, protect it from interruptions, and stay consistent long enough to let it unfold.